Does the thought of network automation feel overwhelming to you? Maybe it's the thought of having to learn Python or becoming a coding expert that's holding you back. Trust me, you're not alone. A lot of people think that network automation is only for developers or highly experienced engineers, but let me tell you, that's just not true. Today, we'll explore what network automation really is, why it's valuable for both you and your team, and what challenges you might face along the way, and how tools like Itential can help you overcome them, even if you've never written a line of code before. Joining me for today's episode is Rich Martin, Director of Technical Marketing at Itential, and someone who has spent years helping IT professionals navigate the world of network automation. Rich has a unique way of breaking down complex technologies and showing how it can solve real-world challenges. Whether it's helping engineers simplify their workflows or showing teams how to scale their networks without all the headaches, Rich has seen it all and knows what it takes to make automation approachable and effective for everyone. So without any further ado, let's roll into this week's episode. Thank you for joining us today, Rich.
Thanks for having me, Dakota. I appreciate it.
Do you mind kind of starting off with a little bit of your backstory and how you got into the field and, what made you so interested in network automation?
Yeah, so I'll give you the short version of it because I don't mind revealing my age. I started back in the days of the BBS, so this is pre-commercial internet. And so communications between, systems was always something that was just exciting to me, right? The idea of connecting to some strange computer somewhere else.
Tall's Fish Market.
And then when the internet became a thing, I remember the first time I wasn't even using FTP or HTTP. This was pre to that. This was Gopher, and I remember pulling a file from a server using Gopher in Germany, like a text file, and I was just amazed. Like, this is the most coolest thing I've ever seen in my life, right? And so that just took me down the road of wanting to understand networking and how we could, not just talk to one or two things, but everything. And so when the internet became a much bigger commercial success, I went down that road. I actually started an ISP, a dial-up ISP, worked for larger ISPs as we got consumed by bigger and bigger companies. And I've seen this whole thing grow over the years, not just networking, but how the internet has exploded, and now it's the de facto standard of basically everything we do in life, as the backbone of it all. But I remember, those early days. Somebody in an ISP is the one man shop, thinking, because I had a programming background before that, thinking, wow, I should be able to automate all this network stuff, and then realizing very, very quickly that I couldn't, right? The tools weren't there. The networking components just were not happy to do any kind of automation, right? Everything was built with human interfaces in mind, CLI. And so that's always kind of struck me. And so as I progressed my journey, and I went from, working at service providers to consulting and helping to build bigger enterprise networks and service provider networks, and then going to the dark side, going to the vendor side of things, and being a pre-sales engineer. And now at director of marketing, I want to bring what we do at Itential. So this is called come right back around, because at Itential, for the last 10 years, we've been focusing on pushing forward network automation, giving folks a set of tools to help get over some of the challenges of automation. And not just automation, automation becomes a journey, right? And we'll talk a little bit about that as well. But coming to Itential on the marketing side, I wanted to help expose how you can automate, what you can do with it, because that one little stone in my shoe from all those years back, I finally said, you know what, we're going to do something about this. And so to be able to amplify this message of how folks can get started, how they can take a look at tools, how they can get going down this market into this career field. And it's the best time in the world to do it is right now, quite honestly.
Well, let's just dive right on into it and ask the big question. Why is network automation becoming such a hot topic item right now? What's changed in the IT world to make this so important?
Great question. So I've been at Itential for 5 years now, and we have progressively seen automation become more and more of a strategic focus for large companies generally, enterprises. Now, if we take a look at service providers, they've always looked at automation as a must have. But what we're seeing now is enterprises are looking at it and saying, this is a must have. And the reason why I think it's twofold, a lot of variables going on. Like I said just a moment ago, the network is more critical than it has ever been before, right? Everything is underpinned by the network or some set of network infrastructure. So that also means it's grown larger. Think about networks from 10 years ago, 5 years ago, networks of today. It's grown larger, it's more complex, different pieces, different parts, and the applications that reside and use the network infrastructure are also more demanding, more complex. So this means in order for us to manage this critical piece of what we do on a day-to-day basis as a business across a lot of devices, a lot of cloud, a lot of services, we need to have automation. It's no longer well, we'd like to have this, or this would be kind of a nice to have. It's a must have. And so, like large service providers who have realized in order to manage large complex networks, enterprises are seeing the same because the network has become more critical to their business and has become a tremendous amount of growth is seen in it. And of course, the interrelatedness, the connectivity of all the different network domains that has to be done between groups. Automation just becomes something like we must have this as well. Not to mention security from a security perspective, making sure if we leverage automation, then we can help make networks not only perform better, operate better, make changes more flexibly, but also to secure it as well.
No one thinks about the network until it stops working.
That's right.
The network is such a vital bloodline, for the organization as a whole. It ensures the cash keeps flowing, it ensures the applications keep working. And if you're trying to do all that manually, it seems really daunting and overwhelming. There's so much to do. Now, for folks listening who might feel stuck, like juggling those manual tasks and putting out fires and fixing the same problem over and over, adjusting VLANs constantly or whatever, what's the biggest reason they should care about automation?
Well, ironically, that is the biggest reason. They should care because what they're seeing is this is insane. Why do we keep doing the same thing over and over and over? And again, because we're seeing more changes on the network or we're seeing the network is more complex. The things that used to take maybe half a minute or a minute or even a couple of minutes now get like multiplied because we're doing it so often. Yeah, this is the reason why you need automation. This is going to take all of those manual, boring tasks from a self-centered point of view and allow you to get past those because quite honestly when we speak to network engineers there's always more important things to do and we got to get through all of the stuff that needs to be done now in order to do that. So I would say you need network automation because what you're seeing putting out the fires, juggling all these manual tasks, getting the backlog done is getting in your way from actually doing the fun and the more important network engineering side of your role.
It is, when you're constantly doing the same thing over and over, or tied up in the little nuisance tasks and not being able to do the fun engineering things, implementing new technologies and strategies, it gets really tiring, to be honest with you. It can wear on you.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I want to touch on a point really quick before we move on is, can we break down who's this specifically benefiting, for, network automation? Is this just helping the senior engineers or is this helping different people across different roles?
Yeah, it's a great point. So I think when we look at network automation, we really need to start looking at it as a journey. And it starts normally with, like we just said, here are a bunch of tasks that we're doing all the time. Somebody steps up and says, I'm going to figure out a way to automate this. Right. And so initially, the benefit is purely like self-centered, right? I don't want to do these things anymore. I need to figure out a way to automate these 20 steps or these 5 steps across 20 devices or whatever that particular use case is. And so they come up with a solution. They do some research. They figure out the tools to use. Maybe they actually find something already out there because that's honestly, if you're struggling over it, there's probably 1,000 or more people that have already struggled over it and found a solution, and it's out there, right? And so they start to implement these and then it becomes, okay, this is a benefit to me. But really remember it's a journey.
Right.
So how do we now amplify that or maybe better word is operationalize it so that it's not just a benefit to me, but it's a benefit to my colleague who sits at my right and my left, right? And then the whole team. And then from there, the organization as a whole. And that's the journey of automation. And that's where you also are going to run into some challenges along the way, and which is what Itential is our applications and tools will help you along that journey. But it starts with that. And I think that's the thing. It starts with that one piece, but you should never just stop there because the value of automation is like the pebble in the pond. It ripples out. So it starts with the individual, it goes to the team, How can we now leverage this automation and more automation with our team across multiple teams? So, everybody leveraging automations together. And then eventually, how do we bubble this up to even expose automations to folks that aren't even part of the infrastructure team? They might be, let's say, the application team, and now they have the ability to order infrastructure as a service through some sort of method, like a self-service method. Could be an API, could be a catalog. And that's the journey that you should start looking at it as, not just starts with an I, but then it becomes an us.
Right. Well, and let's address the elephant in the room, though. Is a lot of people hear network automation and thinks it's this massive, complicated thing. People here think is they got to go become a Python expert to be able to do network automation. Can you give us a simple explanation of what network automation actually is and what it looks like in practice? You kind of already started to, but
The old adage, a 1,000-mile journey starts with a single step, right?
yeah.
And that single step this is a great opportunity right now for folks to start to be the one that takes the single step. Because like I said, if you look around your colleagues in different IT infrastructure teams, compute, server, storage, application, they're leveraging automation already, right? It's networking that has been underserved by automation for a tremendous amount of reasons. But the point about it now is this is an opportunity to start taking those steps. And we really mean that. Take a step. When you think about, okay, automating an entire complex process is a lot, right? But when we break it down, and as network engineers, this is what we do on a daily basis. Whether we're building a complex network, we're doing it a statement at a time, a switch or a router at a time, a protocol at a time, and building it up from there. We should do the same thing here, right? Let's start simple. Let's start with some basic tasks, and we would call this automation. One of the inflection points we are at the industry is to come to like some definitions on terminology, and so you're going to hear me talk about automation and orchestration. And so I'll give you the simple definition here. Automation are the simple tasks that we typically start with, right? So making a change to a VLAN or a port or an interface, if I can automate that, that would be a task, right? But and then over time, you're building multiple automations to accomplish pretty simple tasks. But the idea later is that not only are you building this for maybe your domain team, maybe I'm in the data center team, right? But the cloud team is building automations using maybe even a different set of tools for their tasks. Somebody on the SD-WAN team's doing something like that. Security team, they're doing their own things. Who's going to cobble all those automations together? And that's what we call orchestration. So for instance, if I need to enable an application, because remember, this is a journey, we're thinking we should be also seeing the broader view, the longer term view, is if I'm going to enable an application, I may need to do a task on the data center or maybe multiple tasks in the data center, right? Around ports and things like that, VLANs, VXLAN, whatever technologies you have. I'm probably going to have to make some changes to some firewalls. If this particular application needs to talk to something in the cloud, I might have to leverage some changes in the cloud to make this work. And if all of these automations exist, even though they're with different teams how can somebody use all of these automations together? And that's orchestration, because now we're thinking about the process. We're thinking about the process of what it takes. And that process doesn't necessarily just mean infrastructure. It could also mean things like change management. If we're using ServiceNow and we have to open up a ticket, we got to, document the ticket, we've got to wait for approvals, things like that. All of these pieces, or maybe we're referencing some sort of source of truth from a database or an IPAM or something like that, like Netbox. If you're doing it manually on the orchestration piece, right, which leverages all the automations, but also starts to think in terms of processes. What are all the steps that we need to take in order to accomplish this bigger goal? So you're automating multiple steps, and that's what we would say is orchestration. And that's kind of like that next step. So you start with, so a lot of people think automation is like the orchestration piece, and that can be very, very complex. And then you think about all the tools and all the things that I need. Start with the automations. They're the building blocks that you need, and then progress the journey through there. And interesting enough, Dakota, this opens up a wide variety of opportunities and careers for people that think in terms of, well, in order to automate, I just need to learn. I'm forced to have to learn some new tool set or some language. Not necessarily, because there are builders, there are operators, and what I just described, there are going to be people who are orchestrators, and there are going to be people who are going to know processes and help to deliver like the next set of orchestrations or the next set of automations that need to be built. So there's all kinds of roles available as the marketplace matures and as the technology matures and as enterprises start to adapt and adopt to automation and orchestration.
Yes, the common misconception I think a lot of people have is network automation is going to take away jobs. In fact, I feel it's doing the exact opposite. It is creating even more jobs in the job field, more opportunities, and it's alleviating the network engineers to work on the actual troubles, to actually implement new technologies instead of just constantly break fixing.
And let me add one more point to this because I want to get philosophical for a moment when it comes to this because I do want to blow up that idea of, am I going to lose my job, right? What makes you valuable? Is it the fact that you are a super fast typer that can type a very complex and mysterious CLI at light speed? Is it something else? And by the way, why are we in technology if we're not willing to move forward and learn new things? And as being a network engineer for many years now, I know and I do not accept that we can't learn new things, right? Because I've seen it over and over and over. We learn new things all the
Right.
time.
You have to.
Sometimes we're forced to learn it, right? By the way, remember a time when phone systems were their own network and they didn't ride over IP in Ethernet, but yet somehow that whole thing has changed, and networking engineers figured out how to adapt and adopt those new technologies, right? And think about all the protocols we've had to learn over the years.
Yeah,
So to me, the case in point is we can learn. It's just a matter of what are you willing to learn? What do you want to do? And the mindset here is I have to learn to be a programmer and I have to learn to be an expert programmer. And I think those two things are false. I think you can learn multiple technologies that open up different opportunities in the field to increase your value. And then I think, you don't even if you want to use something like Python, you don't have to start off being an expert at it. That comes over time.
absolutely.
You can start off building basic scripts because they're simple automations. They can even be read only, right? Things like let's in order to troubleshoot this problem, I need to pull 10 different things from 4 different devices. Automate that. It's real read only, right? That saves a tremendous amount of time. And you don't have to be an expert to start to do that.
No, and I was just about to ask you, let's dive down the rabbit hole. Can we talk about some of how network automating would work in the real world? Can you walk us through some of the simple tasks, people can starting with or can start with?
Yeah, so it's always going to be different for the different organizations and like their network setup, what they do and don't have, and a lot of times like maybe the legacy stuff, right? The legacy stuff maybe gives us the most problems. And so one of the things you can do is just looking at your own day-to-day activity. Where's your backlog? What is the stuff that you complain about all the time? And then kind of branch that out. What about your teammates? Because the thing that you deal with, right, maybe a good starting point that's the stone in your shoe, so to speak. But what about your colleagues to the right and the left of you, right? What are they doing? And so maybe sometimes the best first use case maybe isn't the thing that bothers you because think about the multiplying effect, right? If I can help a team versus just myself become more efficient, that's a multiplier. So sometimes it's about looking around and seeing what's going on. But generally speaking, things like port changes, VLAN changes. Here's a great one: disabling and enabling a port to get something to work again.
Yep.
Just simple things like that, adding, deleting routes, things like that. Those are places to get started based off of your comfort level and where you're at. Then again, as you start to build these simple task-based automations using the tools that you feel comfortable using. Some folks gravitate to Ansible because it's not a full programming language. You do have to learn some stuff. You have to learn YAML and of course how the tools work and those kind of things. Some folks gravitate towards Python, which is a full language, but there's so much good stuff out there around networking libraries that make it easier to make changes or to gather data from network devices. And then of course just leveraging stuff that's already built, that's already out there, that's already been tested, that people are like, yeah, this is good stuff. So getting started really is about doing those kinds of tasks, figuring out what are the small things, what can I leverage, what tools are out there, and like I said, they usually fall into those first tasks fall into like, what are the day-to-day changes? How can I grab some information to troubleshoot a problem, or maybe even to see if a problem is about to happen, or like I said, like helping my colleagues by figuring out like just what does their day to day look like. And sometimes it's very obvious, right? This is everybody's backlog.
Absolutely. But, let's be honest. Some of the listeners out there are probably thinking, this all sounds great, but my network's unique or my workflows are too complex to automate. What do you say to those people?
Everybody's network is unique.
Yeah.
No, we get this quite a bit, and there's this sense that we've got to standardize everything in order to even get started automating. And in the last 10 years, we've seen a couple of insights on that. Number one, that's just not true. You can get started automating even though your network is unique, because again, start small, start at the lower levels, and then build up as you go. By the way, as your one of the things that tends to happen too is as your skill set in automation continues to grow, you're going to be able to automate other things to be able to standardize some of those things that you have some concerns about, right? Kind of the snowflake configuration of everything that we have. And honestly, that's where automation also comes into play as we need to have this. We need to be able to standardize everything. We need to make sure we have best practices, both from a best practices from an operational and network engineering perspective, but also, some sort of security policy, things that need to be enabled or need to be disabled on network devices in the network. And, again, Itential has tool sets to help with that, but these are things that everybody needs to be able to do, and automation it can get you there. But again, this is one of those myths. The second insight that I think is that if you go down the route of saying, you know, we will start automating the moment we get everything standardized, I beg you, how long was that going to take?
No,
If automation needs to be done, like if this becomes if this is a strategy that you need to execute on, and it's going to take you several years realistically to get everything in order, that's problematic for the business. And
yeah.
so, and that's what we've seen too. And I think the healthier way to do it is to leverage both. If that's if that's what you'd want to do, if you want to go down that route, start to work on standardization. That's fine, but there are things you can do to make your organization, your teams, your individuals, your teams, and your organization more efficient using automation. That doesn't require like full across the board standardization of everything.
Now, Rich, we touched on this a little bit, but I don't want to just kind of skim over this topic. One of the biggest misconceptions is people worried that this automation is going to replace their jobs, or once they get it in place, they're all no longer going to be needed. What do you say to someone that is feeling that concern?
I get it, right? I get it. We have invested so much into what we know and what we do, and really good at it. I would say what your value is again isn't the fact that you know how to immediately respond with a load of CLI commands, right? And typing them as quickly as possible into a terminal session. That's not your real value. Your experience, your knowledge, that's your value.
Absolutely.
The technique that you use to apply it is the thing you need to fix that will make you more valuable. And so, and that's when I talk to like the heart to heart with network engineers is that like your ability to learn stuff, your knowledge base, your experience, that's what makes you valuable. Learn the tools to express that in whatever means that you would want to learn, right? Like I said, don't get don't get locked into thinking, "Hey, I got to be an expert in some programming language." You don't. The things that like especially when you look at our platform, there's a role for somebody we call the orchestration architect. That is the person that has that knowledge of, okay, in order to bring this site up in the network, I need to do these 20 things. And those 20 things occur across a wide range of not only systems but networking components, firewalls, switches, routers. That person is valuable if they're willing to learn a tool that helps them to express that into an automation or orchestration. It doesn't have to be a programming tool. I mean, it doesn't have to be a programming language. It can be a tool like Itential that can help them visually build these things. We'll take a look at that. This opens up broad new opportunities for folks to leverage what really makes them valuable and makes their organization and their business more efficient. And I think that's the way to start looking at it. Look at it from that perspective.
I'm curious on your personal opinion. Do you think the reason network automation still hasn't been implemented more is because of that fear people have?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
That
And
that's
and
crazy
and yeah, it
if you think
is.
about it.
It is, but my heart goes out to him because I understand, right? I understand that's the human aspect of it. But if we take a more objective look at it, there's a couple things going on. Number one, like I mentioned, network engineers have amassed a tremendous amount of experience, and they got that experience by learning new things, right? So this is just one of those things. So they should stop looking at it as something I don't want to do and something to be excited about, because the limitations that they think are in their heads of I have to learn this one thing and I have to be an expert at it is not absolutely not true. Because where we're at in the industry, there's an entire broad range of tools and opportunities and careers that are opening up for them to, like I said, to leverage what really makes them valuable. The other thing that's coming, it's just kind of like the carrot and the stick, right? That's the carrot. Here's the stick. Large organizations are saying we need to automate everything, and it's been proven over and over, right? When AWS came out, and somebody with an application person with no experience in security or servers or networking could order an application through a dashboard through a few clicks and a credit card, of course, and click give it to me now, and within a couple of minutes they got exactly what they wanted, and they compared that to the experience of having to deal with their own internal IT infrastructure teams and the process internally. It was an eye opener on many ways, right? And now that eye opener is executives are saying, look, we need to be more relevant in the industry. All of our applications have to be faster, have to be better, have to be more meaningful to our customers. All of our IT infrastructure groups need to adopt automation, and not only adopt automation, work together so that we can do things, because the cloud has proven the point. We can do things, it can be done. And a lot of times their competitors are doing these things, so they're being forced. So understand, like 10 years ago, like I said, it was a, well, it'd be nice if we could. Now it's becoming a we must do this.
Absolutely.
And so that's the way I would bookend it with them. It's there's, it's the wave is here, and you have lots of opportunity to go in a lot of different directions, if you're just willing, and you have always been willing to learn new technologies.
Now, for someone who's already started building some automation, but they're running into challenges, maybe it's complexity or scaling or integrating with existing tools and systems they have, how do you guys there at Itential help overcome these hurdles and make this process smoother?
That's a great question. So what I'd like to show you in our demo coming up is just how we do that. So let's start with a couple of different personas. Let's start with somebody who has already adopted and gone down the road of building automation. So they figured out the tools that they want to use. And now they're starting down. Like I said, they've started to build their, maybe their first couple of automations. We'll use the example of Python. We're seeing a lot of folks adopting Python right out the bat. And so we'll use that. And we'll talk about some of the challenges that they're having, because one of them is the scaling and operationalizing of that automation. And this is what's interesting. Um, we see folks that are, and I want network engineers to be the ones building the automations, because there's confidence and trust. Let me give you an example. If I take a network engineer and a developer with no network engineering experience, it's hard to trust from a network engineer's perspective who owns the network. It's hard to trust the developer with no networking background to build a script that I can trust, that won't demolish something important. They don't understand the specific architecture, the nuances, the idiosyncrasy of commands and how we've set things up. So they need that underlying knowledge and foundation of things like, I need to check for this before I make a change,
Right.
right? Or I need to check for these four things before I make a change, like post checks. And then after I make a change, pre-checks. And then after I make a change, I need post checks. Like, let's make sure the thing we configured is working, and let's make sure it didn't break anything else,
Right.
right? And all of those things really come from the network engineering person's mindset, right? Their experience, their knowledge, those kind of things. So I think it's important, it's critically important that they develop the skill sets to be able to build the automations themselves, because they have the internal knowledge of when something is done, let's do it right. Let's not make a change before we need, when things don't look right. And when it's done, let's make sure everything is correct and we didn't break anything else. Those are critical. So it's easier, I think, in a sense, to impart the knowledge of building automation and the tools of the language of choice and expressing the knowledge through that versus the other way around. And it can be done. We have folks doing it, but it takes a very close relationship between the developer and the network person, again, to develop the trust.
Right.
So they understand that. But once you get to there, here's what's interesting. How do we operationalize that? Because if I build a Python script and I can give it to somebody who has the skill set to know how to build the environment of Python on their system, make sure the libraries are up to date, and then they know the commands to execute the script. But what about the team that doesn't? So there's a persona of the builder and there's a persona of the operator. The team that doesn't have the skill set required to build or even execute the automation without building the environment and then maintaining it over time, because scripts change, programs change, libraries change, things like that. So there's that operator. So what we want to do at Itential is help bridge that gap between those teams. So an automator who's focused on building is focused on building, and they're not focused on operationalizing it to the wider audience on their team that all need to have some sort of Python set up and the libraries installed and everything up to date, or even building a front end, because this tends to be what happens as well. Network engineer says, you know what? I'll learn Python. I've done some automation. I'm ready to go. I'm the change agent for the organization, right?
Right.
And they step in and they find some success and they show their manager and they show their team, and the manager goes, "This is awesome. Now go share it with 20 other people on your team." And there are a whole bunch of things, those challenges they have to overcome. Number one, how do I share it? How do I keep the environments going for all 20 people on my team? How do I audit? How do I log? How do I limit? All of those things now become the burden of that person who, again, was just wanting to write some scripts to do some automations. And so if they have to go solve that, that's a lot of work that does go outside of the scope of what they intended. So what we want to do with one part of our portfolio of applications is to help people who are building automations focus on building automations and sharing that in such a way that makes it super simple that consumers or operators can also work. And then this is where you get like that multiplying effect. Somebody can focus on building, they do their part, and then there's an entire group that can operate it. So that's the one thing. That's one big challenge. The other big challenge is, again, what do we do now that we have multiple teams, multiple groups building automations, and who's stitching them together into processes that go one after another? Because this is where you start to also understand that automation, though, if a team has a tremendous portfolio of automations they can run, there's still a process that's above them, right? So if a ticket comes in from an application owner that says, "Hey, I need this application spun up, and I need all this infrastructure," then all those different teams have to run their automations manually, and they're usually driven by some sort of ticket process, right?
Right.
The application owner says, "I need this," and it spins out a set of tickets to a bunch of different group and a bunch of different teams. And while they have their automations, that's still a manual process.
Right.
And so that next thing is orchestrating it, and that's the other part of our platform as well, that helps people start to orchestrate all of these automations together as a process.
Nice. Now, a lot of people assume that automation has to be this big, huge thing, like it's all or nothing change. And can you talk about how teams can start small and build confidence with their simpler tasks that they do every day?
Like I said, just start small. I personally, I just start with a bunch of read operations. You know, I start with something like, let's take a look at the error statistics on some problematic ports on the network, right? Let's generate some reports and see what's going on there. Build your confidence up to that before you start making changes. Build a lab with one or two devices, and then make sure your scripts run across those labs. So you're building confidence in the code. Leverage existing stuff that's already out there that people are using. That's the fastest way to get started, honestly, is to leverage what's already out there, and get involved in communities as well. So if you've never heard of Network Automation Forum, and they have a conference, several conferences a year, AutoCon, that just started to get kicked off like a year or two ago.
Yeah.
Get involved in those communities and share best practices. That's what they're all about. And get started small in that way. That's the easiest way to do it. And again, this is a process and a journey, and your skill set's going to increase. You're going to start to make bigger and bigger strides. Like I said, figure out the problem, figure out the tool set you want to use, getting some small wins with even little things like generating reports, looking at interfaces. Build your confidence, figure out where you can start making small changes, maybe in certain areas of the network that aren't as critical, right? Let's not jump right into the transit and the core network, right? But let's start in those areas and then let's build those small wins and snowball them up. We see it all the time. And then once that starts generating attention and not attention through efficiency is really what it boils down to, then you can start to work on the bigger things. But build the automations one step at a time. Let's do this one thing, let's do this one thing, let's do this one thing. And then you can get into the journey of orchestration, which is where the complex things start to happen. But it starts with the foundational automation piece.
So, Rich, I first learned about Itential at Network Field Day, and I got to see the demo and how it works, and I thought this was such an interesting thing coming from someone who really doesn't utilize network automation as much as I should. And one of the exciting things I thought about Itential is how it makes automation accessible, even for those folks who don't consider themselves developers. Can you walk us through how that actually works in action?
Yeah, can I go ahead and jump in the demo?
Absolutely.
Let's start off here. This is not our platform, right? This is where the network engineer turned automation builder is starting to, starting his journey. So I'm on my laptop. I've got a development environment. I've learned Python to a point. I'm not an expert, but I know how to do basic stuff. I've leveraged some scripts. I'm using some tools like Git, which is version control repository for developers. It's like a standard that generally most developers use as part of their workflow process. And what they do, and I'll give you an example, is they're editing scripts. So for instance, here's a script, and I'm pulling live data from one of my switches in my network here at home. And I'm just going to pull information from a port, but I'm running version 1.0, right? Let's say I make some changes and I update it to version 1.1. So I'm writing a script. This is my normal workflow now as a developer. I'm running the script. So now the script is running through Python 3. The name of it is called get interface counters.py. It's a Python script, and I'm giving it two variables: a device, which is the IP address of the device in my network, and then an Ethernet interface. In this case, it's 112. It's where my pfSense router is, and it's pulling information off of my router in real time. So I've automated a step just to read. It could be a write, but in this case, it's just easier to read for a demo. But you see, I'm running version 1.1, and as a developer, I'm happy with this. I'm super excited. This is great. So now I'm going to check this into my repository. So I'm going to use the git command, and now I'm going to push the change that I just made, which is just an update to version 1.1, to a git repo. Now that git repo ideally has my team can access that, right? Now, but let me ask you a question, Dakota. If you, as an operator without this background, if I gave you a copy, or if I told you this, even worse, if I said, Dakota, I just gave you access to the git repo, go run that Python script from the git repo. And if you had no background, no skill set, you're a network engineer, you know your stuff, right? But now we're talking a skill set that's outside of what a network engineer needs to know on a day-to-day basis, right? This is more of that development skill set. And it's not hard, but I'm asking you to do that. And you're like, well, wait a minute, I don't know how to do that. You're going to have to step me through it. So now as a developer, I'm going to say, okay, this is what we need to do. Let's install the Git executable on your machine. What kind of machine you have? You got Mac or Windows or Linux.
Right.
Then we have to install Python. Then we have to install the libraries. Then we have to, make sure the environment is set up correctly so you can execute, everything's executable in your path. Like all of these things I have to step you through. And then I can teach you how to use Git to pull it down and then to actually run it. Okay, that's a lot of work.
That sounds complicated.
Yeah, that's a lot of work for me as a developer because all I want to do is write code and help you run the code. But now what I'm really doing is I'm stepping aside and helping you operate the code, to run the code. So what we need as a solution is a way to make that easier so that I as a developer can develop, you as an operator can operate. And by the way, you're Dakota number one. I have 20 Dakotas on my team that also need to operate this. So am I supposed to now help every one of them? And then, of course, I might get the idea, oh, well, I'll just throw it on a Linux server. And that way there's one environment, right? And then I'll just have 20 Dakotas log into that. But then I have to solve other problems like authorization, logging, auditing, all these other things. So this is an issue that we've seen our customers go through. And so that's why we built something we call the Itential automation service. And so what this really involves in, you can think of it as two components. The first component is how do we make the automation engineer's life easier by taking all of that off the plate, having to manage all of these environments, set up logging, all of those things that I would have to teach Dakota how to do, and then Dakota is going to forget it within a couple of days, or I'm going to update my Python environment here or my libraries, and then Dakota's environment breaks, and then Dakota 1 through 20's environments break. So that's the issue. So with the Itential solution, what you can do, I'll make it easy. There's a component of our solution that you can install on a Linux machine, and it installs a server. And you access this server through a command called iagctl. I can log in as admin. So this could be a different persona. It could be me initially setting this up, but ultimately, this is a server that's going to be set up so that it's going to make Dakota, the operator, his job super easy. But the initial setup is pretty straightforward. The first thing we need to do is we need to be able to get the repository. So once I've logged in, I can use this command to operate the server, so that I need to first set up the repository. Remember, as a developer, I'm pushing all my code to Git, right? And so that's like the central source of truth for the latest version of that script. So the first thing I need to do is I need to set the server up, the automation gateway server up, to have access to pull that source down. Okay. Along with that source, I'm also creating a file called requirements.txt that defines the Python environment and all the necessary modules, because this is critical. Because what this software will do is it's not only going to pull down that executable, but it's going to pull down the requirements definition and build the requirement on the fly when it's asked to execute that particular script. So again, Dakota doesn't have to build the environment and manage it, and me, Rich, the developer, doesn't have to build and manage the environment. The software builds and manages an environment, because all we want to do is allow somebody to execute and operate that automation. So the first step is give it access to the Git repo, which is what I've done here. The second piece of that is you have to create a service. And again, everything is accessible through here. So IAG create service. If I give it a -- help, this is where I can create a service. And a service is tied to a script or an automation that I've created as a developer. And all I'm really doing is that I'm giving it a service name, and I'm telling it what kind of automation tools I'm using. In this case, I'm going to be using a Python script, and I'm telling it where in the Git repo that it should be looking for that. So I already have a service created for that script that I showed you that was getting the interfaces. So I've already configured it. If I do an iagctl get services, these are the services that I've built. I've built one for several different scripts here, but this is the one I'm looking at, the get interface counters. That's the one I ran on the command line a moment ago as the developer. And so if I describe the service, that's going to tell me how it's configured, and you can see the pieces that would need to be defined. So I'm giving it a name, get interface counters. I'm telling it to type Python script. This is all, I pre-configured this ahead of time. I'm telling it the working directory. So this is the working directory in Git, in the Git repo that I've put it into, and I'm telling it the executable name. And then I've created something called a decorator. A decorator is a way to create a form, because we're about to get into the GUI version of this for the operator, but I'm showing you the kind of the back end that a developer or a builder would use to get things started. So this is a decorator defines the form for the two fields that I need to pass to the script. And then I can give it a description and a series of tags. And here's the cool thing. Once I've done that, I can run the script anywhere through the iagctl client. So as Dakota, I could show you how to run this. I could get you to install iagctl client, give you a login, point it to the server that I have running, and then say, this is all you need to do to run that script now. So what's actually going on when I run that script, and it's the exact same script that I ran a minute ago as the developer from my own development environment, is it's pulling everything down from the Git repo. It's building the Python environment based off of the requirements.txt, which is in the Git repo. And then it's executing that script within that environment. So it's built the whole thing. So every time I change any of those elements, everything can be rebuilt on the fly. So Dakota doesn't have to worry about any of those things. He just has to run the doggone service. That's it, right? And so you get what you want. So here's what's cool. So you see version 1.1 here. This is what's really surprising for a lot of developers. They can go now, once I've created that service one time, as soon as let's do this. Let's go 2.0. As soon as I've checked that into my Git repo, I don't have to do another thing. The service is going to dynamically, so it's already built, and it's going to dynamically pull everything down. It's going to notice that we've got a new version of this script, version 2.0. It's going to pull it down, and then it's going to build the environment and execute it. So now, me as a developer, I can develop, right? I can develop, and the operator doesn't have to worry about, am I running the right script? Do I have the right environment? Everything is done for you. And I think this is a super convenient way to help the overcome those challenges. Okay, so now that we've taken a look at the Itential automation service from the developer or builder's perspective, I want to kind of switch over to the operator's point of view from this. This is kind of like the SaaS web front end version of the Itential automation service, and this is really built for the operator. So this is where, on a day-to-day basis, they're going to come in and run these automation services. And I said service because it's not a script anymore. Because remember, the whole point of this is to allow the developers to develop, so that in their point of view, they don't have to worry about environments. So me as an operator, when I log in, what I see is this dashboard. And so I get to see like all of the frequent automations, the automations that have recently completed, anything that's scheduled coming up. So from my perspective, when I take a look at the automations that are available to me, I have quite a few. Since I'm logged in as admin, I have quite a few, but let me summarize it down to the particular automations from a gateway. And this is the gateway that's at my house that we've been kind of using at the front part of this demo, where I was showing you everything from the command line. So once I've created that service, so we started with the developer building an automation, kind of going through their workflow, right, of building, testing, and then eventually checking it into their Git and committing it into their Git repo. Once a service is built in the CLI part of this automation service, what we call Automation Gateway, then that service becomes available for other people to use at the command line. But then it also, once I onboard that gateway into the SaaS piece of this application, then it becomes available to operators that I allow it to log into here. So now these are the automations that are being presented from the gateway here at my house. So literally now, from the web front end, through the cloud, I can click on that same automation that I was running locally, through the CLI, and now anybody that we give access to through the SaaS front end can run that automation. So what's really going on here is the same thing. It's sending a command to the gateway here at my home network, asking it to run that Python script. It's pulling it down from Git. It's generating the runtime environment, so the Python itself, all the libraries. It's pulling down the executable, and then it's running it. And then if I go under activities, I'll be able to see all of the frequently or previously run scripts. And in this case, this is the output that I'm getting. It's the same output that the developer gets when they run it locally. But now here I am from the cloud side of things. I can access these automations through, again, a service. And so one of the things I don't have to do here or worry about as an operator is I don't even know what kind of automation this is, because it doesn't really matter. Is it Ansible? Is it Python? Is it OpenTofu? Doesn't matter, right? I'm looking at it from the service perspective. And the idea that we're getting to here is that I have multiple gateways from multiple teams, because this is the idea of scaling out. So you're scaling out the automations from like the data center team. Their gateway is onboarded into the web front end, the SaaS front end, and then we start to add users into this and give them access to the different gateways and therefore the different automations. And so now we can scale that out to multiple teams sharing multiple automations. So in this case, I've got gateways from a cloud team. So here are the cloud teams, their gateways, their gateway, and here's the automation services that they've published. Again, they're probably using OpenTofu or Terraform. I don't really even know, because as an operator, I don't need to know. I just need to know what to run and how it works. This could be the data center team. Again, here's a bunch of published automation services they're running. And you kind of get the point here. We get a lot now. Here's the security team, same thing. This is where we consolidate all of those automations into one place, but give every domain team their own server, their own ability to choose the tools that they like, that they want to use to build automations, and we just make this all available in one, one interface to the operators. And again, allowing the network in the automation developer on the network and infrastructure side to focus on what they're doing, not build environments, and not even have to build all of the front end piece, which is something you would normally have to solve for if this falls into your lap.
Right.
And we have people we speak to all the time that are getting into the automation side of things, of building the automations themselves, and they the next thing they start to think is, I've got like a half dozen or a dozen automations. How do I get these out to the people on the team that aren't the developers? I have to figure out a web framework and a execution environment and put logging in and RBAC and all kinds of things like that. These are the tools that we provide to all of those teams, so that as they continue down this journey, they have something to help them overcome those challenges, so they can focus on specifically what they need to do.
Well, and it takes all the guesswork out. You know, like you were mentioning earlier, it just simplifies everything so much, and yeah, it allows them to focus on creating the automation and doing the actual task. Then, okay, what do I need, to do to be able to share this out?
Yep, you got it. You hit the nail on right on the head.
Perfect. Awesome. Simple.
Okay, Dakota. So we've talked about how the kind of the personas of the builder and the operator, and how part of the Itential platform can help them and their challenges, which is really the start of that whole journey. Now I want to take you to another application in our portfolio that is focused on orchestration, because we've talked about this here generally earlier, as the orchestration piece is kind of like that next stage. It leverages automations all together, along with, and starts thinking in terms of processes. And again, this is somewhere where somebody can really build a career into doing this, because this isn't just an Itential thing. This is something everybody's going to have to solve for in the automation journey. But Itential does give you some tools. So if you're that person that says, well, I have a lot of network experience, but I don't want to learn to write code, I don't want to be a programmer, that's fine. We have a tool that can allow you to leverage all that experience and become somebody like an orchestration architect. And we're seeing that role start to become a thing with organizations now, because that's the person that understands a bigger process and can put all those pieces together. So let me show you how that's generally done in our platform. Just to kind of give you a glimpse or a taste of it. So this is our studio where you're going to build a workflow. We call a workflow an orchestration workflow. So this is a number of steps or tasks that you can kind of drag and drop into here. And you drag and drop them from a palette. So we call this the task palette. And again, think of a task as a single step. It could be an automation step, or it can be a step from a different system that's integrated into the Itential platform. So what are these kind of systems? You have ServiceNow, you have Infoblox, you have maybe Netbox or some other database. This part of our platform allows you to integrate through APIs into any of those systems, but it also onboards through the gateway we just talked about. It onboards all of your automation, so that now you have this toolbox, this palette, that I can start dragging and dropping things from right off the bat and start to build this process step by step. So this is orchestration. So if I started off, basically I use this as a whiteboard. This canvas becomes a whiteboard. So I can search for a task here called a stub task. It's going to give me this. This is an internal task that I can use in the platform just to stub something out. So stub something out is it's a placeholder. That's all it does. It doesn't really do anything, but it helps me to logically think about the process. And maybe the first step here is to automate some step in AWS. Maybe I don't even know what that particular automation is, but I know what the step is, right? And then when I double click it, I get the variables that I need to set. In this case, since I'm really not doing anything, I don't need to set any variables. But you get the idea here. I can start to drag and drop things from my palette set, and then I can define the execution path this way from start to end, right? And now I can kind of layer on more and more and more of these tasks to start getting to the point where I'm building a step-by-step orchestrated workflow that accomplishes some more complex task. So the thing we talked about earlier, man, automating all the stuff is very complex. You're absolutely right when you think in those terms. But when we start simple and get the task automations completed, and then you have a tool like this that helps you now to integrate the different systems, and then to integrate those automations together and to drag and drop them into that flow, this is where we simplify all those things. And those are challenges that every organization will have to accomplish.
No, it is.
So if I have something like ServiceNow, or let's say Infoblox, you'll notice if I look here, I have a lot of different tasks here, and these come from the integration. So all these different systems have APIs, application programming interfaces. And in our platform, what we do is we integrate with those systems, and then we read all of those methods, those API methods, and we turn them into drag and drop tasks. So you can just drop them onto the canvas. And so you can do things like, for info blocks, look up at the next IP address,
That's cool.
and then use that in your workflow. So in this case, I'm just going to progress this along from kind of that next thing that we want to do. And so I'm starting to build out a more complicated orchestrated workflow here. So in this case, I've replaced my stub task with something called a child job. A child job runs another workflow. So in addition to building a workflow here, I can save a workflow and call it as another step in a bigger workflow. So this is modularity. Just like in automations, you're building like these task-based automations. As a workflow, I might build a modular workflow that completes a task that's multiple steps. So for instance, opening up a ServiceNow ticket through the API could be like 4 or 5 tasks, right? So I can now turn that into a single task and call that as a child job. And that's what I'm doing here. This is actually running an automation that has been published by the cloud team within their gateway. And this automation, I have no idea as the orchestration architect what it's written in. I know how it's called and I know how it's being used, but now I can start leveraging all those automations and then start also building integrations into those automations, because in order to call like any particular script, I need to feed it some information and some data. That information and some data could come from a form. It could come from a previous task, orchestrated task. But I need to transform that data from one set of information to another set of information. So for instance, if I'm pulling an IP address from Infoblox, the next available IP that I want to configure on an interface, I'm going to have to take the response back from Infoblox. And we do this all the time, by the way. We paste it in Notepad and put it, and then copy it, the pieces that we need, into a template. So I would need to do some sort of data transformation, and that's what these tasks are about. Let's say we pull some information from Infoblox, we manipulate it in some way so that we can feed it to a script, right, in the format and the destination it expects, so that it can run successfully. And then a lot of times we need to get the output from a previous task. In this case, it's a query. A query allows us to say, this task ran. This is a script that runs in AWS, and it gives us some amount of output. In order to verify that we have it's almost like a post check. In order to verify that the output is good, I want to query some piece of data out of that and just compare it. And that's when we start to build these workflows a little step at a time. So again, challenges of jumping into something complex, we need to take it a step at a time. And that's what the platform is about. So that's for one particular script that came from the cloud team. The next step as an orchestration architect would be now to leverage multiple automation scripts together. So in this case, I'm doing this stack is what we just built, but in this case, I'm leveraging an automation here from the cloud team for AWS. I'm leveraging a script here that's been that's been exposed into our platform. This is from the data center team, adding routes to a router in the data center. And again, I'm doing the same set of processes here. I'm transforming data to pass to the script. I'm taking the script's output, I'm querying it, and then I'm continuing down the next piece here, which is a set of transformations to leverage a script that the security and firewall team have now exposed to us. And so this is the role of the orchestration architect, is to tie all of these things into a cohesive process. And then the last step of this is to do some fallbacks and some error checking. So in this case, it's the same 3 stacks running the same 3 scripts, manipulating data, querying data out, and then eventually saying, if that data doesn't match, we need to take an error route. In this case, it's a simple step, but in other cases, you may build this out. And so this is how, as you can start to orchestrate these more complex tasks, one step at a time, leveraging all of those automations. And then eventually you get to a point where you're building out a library of orchestrated workflows to do things like create, delete, disable, enable entire services. And so this is where orchestration leads to. And of course, the next step after that is, how can we put those in a self-service portal so that our application teams can use them, maybe through APIs or maybe through some sort of self-service through something like ServiceNow. And so this is where the automation journey can take you. Automation, orchestration, self-service, productization. And this is part of the Itential platform, different steps for different areas to get you to that point when you're ready for it, kind of meeting you where you're at.
This is amazing, and it makes it super simple. In all honesty, it really breaks down that barrier to start doing more and more advanced automations. And I'm curious, like, when people are seeing this for the first time, what is like one feature or capability that usually surprises them the most?
Oh, so for the so when we started, when we talked to developers, the automation builders, those brave souls that have gone down that route, um, they're happy to not have to build all of the things that we've built into here, right? So, and I think what they're surprised about is the fact that we stay out of their way. We stay with you create a service, the service is published, and they can continue to work exactly how they work, and they don't have to take time to build environments and do any of that. And we just basically let them do what they want to do. And for the operator, it's just simplicity of being able to pick what I need to run, execute it, get the detail that I need, and move on with things so that I can get to the better portions of my job that are more exciting. And when you get into the orchestration piece and building this, like you said, the way we integrate with so many different systems in the platform from the studio, and how we can simplify building these, these very complex things out into stepwise progressions. And they have all the tools they need there. I think they're very excited and surprised by how they can do that. Now, of course, and all these things, you still have to do some measure of learning, but the reality is we all have to learn new things all the time anyway. And by doing this, you're actually expressing the value of what you know and the knowledge you have into the tools of choice and what you're willing to learn.
That's amazing. Now, for the people that are listening that are like, okay, I'm ready to dip my toes into automation, but don't really know where to start. What's the easiest way to like just start doing some basic automation?
Yeah, figure out the tools that you're willing to learn. Um, if you're a developer, Ansible or Python is usually where you want to start with the tools of choice. And then, like I said, just focus on getting those little wins. Start with reading some stuff, and then starting with making changes to maybe parts of the network that aren't super critical, and then move from there. Show people the work that you're doing and getting a consensus that can help snowball in your organization.
A lot of IT pros are probably starting to see the value in automation, but convincing leadership can be tough. Um, convincing leadership to make that investment. How can teams start to make a strong case for automation in their organization?
Okay, so this is an interesting question because a lot of times as engineers and especially network engineers, we speak a different language than management, right? And if we want to convince management, we have to speak in the language that they respond and understand. And to them, it's value and efficiency, right? And it's really value as a function of efficiency. And so these are the things you need to start thinking in terms of. This used to take me 5 minutes or to do this one task, and now I'm doing it in 10 seconds, right? Now multiply that out by how many times a day, multiply that out by how many people can do this. And now you've got a convincing way of speaking a language. I'm going to be able to save our organization, your organization, Mr. Manager or Mrs. Manager, X amount of time for a single automation. And now, if you give me the ability to continue down this route and get the tools that we need to operationalize it, these are the kind of savings that we can start to see. And not only that, those savings means we respond to things faster. So, what are we metriced by? How quickly can we respond to problems and resolve them? Operationalizing our automations means that metric goes way down, right? Or the metric gets better, however you want to express it. Or is it about delivering
Yeah.
infrastructure faster to those folks that are asking for it? Is the networking team always the stumbling block? Do we always get pointed at in the black eye because we can't get things done compared to the compute and all the other teams, the cloud teams? This is our opportunity to get a seat at that table.
Right.
And so talking to them in that value statement versus, and it's in more of an organizational value, right? That's
Right.
the way you can get their attention and express it in a way that they will understand and respond to and be motivated by, quite honestly.
We've covered so much today, but if there's one thing you want every listener to walk away with, what would that one thing be?
Um, Automation is a journey. Don't get overwhelmed right from the very beginning. Just like we take complex problems, troubleshooting, building networks, and we break them down into their individual steps, their individual components, individual CLI to individual devices, and we build something up from there. It's the exact same methodology here. We're at a great point in the industry, tons of opportunity. So that should be a motivator and exciting for you. And you have the opportunity to be the change agent and the leader for this, which puts you at a prime place of importance and value. And you are not cornered into a very specific technology in order to do automation and to be an expert at it. You can get started, like I said, in small ways and then build over time. That's the best advice I would give them for listeners.
Again, I really appreciate you taking the time to come on and share all this wonderful knowledge with us. And for someone who's ready to dive deeper into network automation and wants to explore what you guys there at Itential can do, where's the best place for them to start?
Start at our website, itential.com. From there, you can go into many different directions. If you want to learn more about automation use cases, we've got a page for that. If you want to learn more about automation versus orchestration, right? And maybe the entire journey, because we have products to meet you at wherever you're at, start there. And if you're already doing automation, if you're already building automation, you have a team and you're seeing some of those initial challenges of operationalizing it to your team of Dakotas, you can download a free trial of the automation services that I showed where you get you get the CLI piece, but then you get the GUI piece as well. And you can start testing that free trial and get going and see if it works for you.
That's so cool. Again, Rich, thank you for taking all this time to show us everything that's so wonderful.
Absolutely.
Everyone, I hope you found some value in today's episode. And until next time, keep learning.